Hello once again everyone, and welcome back to Moveset Breakdowns. This is part 4 of my Ghost of Tsushima breakdown. If you haven't seen the other parts, I recommend you start there, so that way you'll be caught up here. But for some newcomers, in case you haven't seen this before, what I'm doing is I am breaking down the movesets of various video game and occasionally television characters. And this is not meant to be a realism analysis, this is just meant to be looking at the individual pieces and appreciating character growth through choreography. So with that in mind, now we finally come to the final stance, the moon stance. And if you saw last week's episode, you know very well that I am not a fan of spinning or kicking. Two things I'm not particularly good at. And I guess the universe was laughing at me when they heard me say that, because this involves more spinning and more kicking. Now, I gotta say I'm a little bit disappointed with the moon stance. Now, no harping on the developers here or anything along those lines, you know. Making 4 unique stances is not an easy thing to do, right? But as far as thematically, I don't feel that the moon stance really gives you a whole lot, and it's quite a departure away from the rest of Jin's fighting. I mean, for the most part, even his more outlandish, his stone stance is pretty solid, pun intended. His water stance makes total sense. His wind stance, a little bit weirder, but still not necessarily outside the realm of Jin's fighting. The moon stance, I feel it's a bit of a letdown, unfortunately. But let's get into that and you can decide that for yourself. So first and foremost, let's talk about what the stance is going to be and what it gives you, right? So the moon stance is designed to beat brutes, the bigger enemies that you will encounter amongst the Mongol horde. And I can kind of see where they were going with this, but I don't really feel that it works very well. I mean, even the wind stance that didn't necessarily deal with the spear at least had movement that could deal with the spear. Versus this, I don't feel really settles itself against the brutes all that well. But you can decide that for yourself. So first and foremost, to form our stance, what we're going to do is we're going to put the left foot forward, and we're going to raise the sword up high. Now this is not held directly ahead of you like Lugisland would be, if you're familiar with Messer. This is held kicked off to the side and very open, right? So this feels relatively natural. I mean, it feels like I'm prepping up for a very big cut. And in fact, if Jin were to use this with very wide offline steps, that's not a bad cut. And at first when I saw the stance, my thought was, oh, okay, so this stance is gonna be him opening himself up, in comes the big attack, he's gonna sidestep and cut, and then he's gonna go from there. And I think that would have been really cool, but he basically doesn't use the sword once it's up here. So kind of a missed opportunity there. Now as for his block, it's gonna be right here. It's basically gonna be, ooh, I want to look at my Hammond some, right? Or Hammond, the river on the blade, right? As far as blocks go, again, not as interesting as some of the others we've seen. So again, a bit of a letdown, unfortunately, in my opinion. But besides that, the kind of big showy pieces are that the moon stance features 2 kicks, things I'm great at, and 2 spin moves, basically. So we're going to go over the spin moves and then over the kicks, and for the most part, the rest of the cutting is going to be stuff we've seen before. But his first action out of this moon stance is going to be bringing the sword up and across his body. So this is going to be very similar to when we were in the water stance and we brought ourselves here to make the opening. So same kind of idea, except now we're going to bring it across our body. Now from here, what Jin's going to do is he's going to extend it out with a horizontal cut, and at the same time we're going to step up with our left foot. Now from here, we're going to keep the cut going, and I'm going to spin again through, and I'm going to sink down. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm powering the cut in a 360 degree. So here's that again, here, across, 1, 2, 3, right? Now, Jin does it much, much faster than I am, and I can kind of see how you would get some more momentum out of the cut, but spinning doesn't necessarily mean a cut is going to keep going. Certainly it's threatening people, so if I am surrounded, in theory, doing this does at least cause the guys around me to go, okay, sharp thing, I don't want to walk into that, but I'm not getting a ton of power. Now following this, he's doing just a standard drop, something we've seen before, and his hand is held very high out to the side. So I'll show that from the side. So we're in our stance, bring it across, right? Now, from here, he ends up in this low position, which actually is kind of fun because this reminds me a lot of the Kensei moveset, so it's really cool to do this again. But from down here, what he's going to do is he's going to bring it down and place his other hand on the grip, and we're going to do basically a spinning cut going the other way. So he's going to rise up, 1, 2, and sync with it there. Now his hand will just kind of hover over here, once again, very similar to if he did his, parry drop, very similar to that. So here's that again. So we just spun 1, we're going to bring it up, 1, 2, boom, right? And we come down here. So here's that from the side. So, da-da, drop, through here. Now I believe the reason that he's sinking like this is because he's trying to threaten in multiple directions and then bring himself out of harm's way in case anyone's trying to time his movement, which I do actually think is a very good idea, and I wish they'd expanded on that more. I'm certainly cool with the idea of having flow sets like this. Like Geralt of Rivia has one that I didn't actually touch on when I did his moveset breakdown, so I may revisit that. But either way, I think it would have been really cool for Jin to, use this against multiple opponents, certainly because as time goes on, this is his last stance. He's been fighting multiple enemies throughout the whole game. So it'd be really cool if he had, for example, and I'm just spitballing here, maybe as his standard attacks, he had big, wide cuts to deal with brutes who do, one solid and kind of hang out there for a minute. And then if he had area attacks, it would be, quick series of cuts, utilizing his already shown, right? He'll hit the target, and then he'll spin around to focus on a new target. I think that would have been really cool to see him use basically flow patterns and then use the drop to bring himself out of the way, following people trying to time his motion. So again, I think a bit of a missed opportunity. But either way, let's put those two spins together, and bear with me, I'm doing the best I can here. But we're up here, bring it across the body, 1, 2, 3, across, 1, 2, 3, and we're down. Here's that from the side. We're here, across the body, 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, right? And he covers much more distance. I kind of did a little bit of a pirouette there to stay on camera. Now, following this, you end up basically right foot forward, and the sword is held here / here, right? I'm relatively inconsistent with how I keep this, so apologies on that. He will do the same action that we did to start this off with again. So he's propped up here. He's going to once again turn it over, raise up, 1, 2, 3, and we're back to here. So he's kind of like a corkscrew, wind up, wind out again, or what I mean. Anyway, it's again kind of disappointing. I mean, don't get me wrong, coming up with combos for fighting multiple people or things like that, or limited mocap, it's hard. And credit to where credit is due. They made a great game, and they have great movesets and all that stuff, but I really feel this one could have had more to it. But anyway, so he does, like I said, cuts from one side, cuts back, cuts again, and that's where we get into something a little more unique. So he finishes in this position once again. Now, from here, what he's going to do is he's actually going to do, once again, a rising cut with the crosshand side. So earlier on when I said, he never seems to cut from this direction, they made up for it later. He's going to raise up, boom. No, I did my footwork wrong on that. He's going to raise up, boom, there we go. And we're going to throw a quick little rising cut. He'll throw a second rising cut, again, using good passing step forward as we've seen before. From here, he'll do a middle, and then he does a unique one, which is going to be, he's going to raise it above into Chudan, lift his foot, and really sink himself down into that last cut. So let's show that again. So we've just finished our spin to win. We're going to turn over, up, through, settle. Now I'll show that from the side. So we just done spin. We're going to up, middle, through. That part I actually kind of like because it is standard cutting, but I like seeing him come out of this position. And if you don't do the second spin, then he'll do that, and that does look pretty cool, You come out with this big wide stance, You move into 1, 2, 3. Oh no, he's open, but he's not. And then he goes into something else. That's kind of cool. And I wish that we had more, maybe throws or something from there, He opens himself up big. Here comes an attack. Maybe he does one of his quick draw moves or something along those lines. Or maybe he does something along the lines where he'll cover and then use some groundwork to take someone down. That would have been really cool to see. But again, I'm spitballing. Now, following this, his next 2 big attacks are going to be kicks. Good luck. Now, in regards to what kind of kicks he launches, it's going to be exactly the same as last time, so it's just going to be lowering and extending, but this time he'll do it on both sides. So we'll just finish that hard stomp. So what he'll do is he will once again go ahead and bring the back foot up. Boom. But this time he's going to reset, and then from here he's going to bring himself over and launch in that second kick. So he comes over, boom, and he does lower the sword to the ground, which again, I don't necessarily like this, right? Now he is throwing his kicks up at head level, which I can't do, so bear in mind, right? But on this side, when he threw the kicks here, his sword was always kind of hovering, right? It never placed on the ground, it came close, but he always kept it in front just in case something went wrong. When he does the kick with this side, his sword is touching the ground. He's got his hand there, which doesn't seem in character with him. Now, don't get me wrong, Jin is practical. And so maybe that is meant to show, okay, he's no longer treating this quite as much as a sacred thing, but it seems like too much of a departure in regards to his kicks. I think it would have been cool if instead on this side, he had adopted the more straightforward sort of teep kick that we see from some of the other Tsushima Islanders, specifically the bosses that you fight for the various duels, or something along those lines. That would have been cool to add some asymmetry in his kicks, to not put his hand down, but oh well. So once again, that's pretty much the extent of it. So now I'll go ahead and do, as best I can, the full combo, as it will, using the spin, into the cuts, into the kicks. So, we're going to be here, across, 1, 2, out, 1, 2, in, 1, 2, out, and you see how I even want to turn my hand over on reflex. Now I'm going to back myself up. We're here, 1, 2, 3, down, back myself up again. Now we're going to load up, boom, reset, stance over, boom, and then we're back up to here. Which, it's cool, it's all right, but it doesn't flow very well together. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a terrible kicker. But here's that from the side, as best I can manage. Open stance, prep, 1, 2, down, 1, 2, out, 1, 2, down. And go ahead and readjust myself. 1, 2, 3, stomp. Then we're going to go ahead and launch into kick 1, step up, kick 2, and then he will actually do one more kick out of that, by the way. Sorry, not kick, cut. He'll finish here, he'll reset, and then he will once again launch into a hard stomping kick. So there is another unique piece to the moon. But either way, kind of ending on a weak note. And as far as, something I've kind of mentioned here and there has been the idea of Jin's character growth through his swordsmanship. And I do think that is still apparent, like don't get me wrong. He starts off very stoic, very stone, very set in his ways. He opens himself up to moving more like these foreigners with the water stance, but he still kind of has his root very apparent. He moves on to the wind stance, which uses much bigger motion, and starts employing some more, not necessarily underhanded tactics, because we see other Tsushima Islanders kick, but most of them are not portrayed as good people. For example, the Straw Hats or the various guys you fight in the quest to get unique armor or unique swords or the Heavenly Strike, those are not reputable individuals. And that still works in my opinion. Then when it comes to Moon, he's using things that, to quote a moveset breakdown person that gave me this idea, he would have to be very skilled to pull this kind of stuff off. I'm not saying it's impossible, just saying that it does kind of take a hard left turn into different. but not necessarily crazy, right? Now, there's not really anything else unique apart from, of course, him being able to light his sword on fire, which I have no idea how he's achieving that, and I'm certainly not going to do that to my Boken. But sorry to end on a bit of a meh note, but I did really enjoy going through all these stances, and you do see how Jin changes over time. I think they could have done more with the moon stance, especially since they have such a dramatic position and who it's meant to counter. It's meant to counter brutes. I would have liked to see, if we went under the same pretense, right? So if we're going to be fighting brutes, I would have liked to see, like I said, wide steps and big cuts from above, because he doesn't really do a whole lot of big cuts from above with one hand, and since he's out here, he has a lot of range that he can implement. I would have loved to see still some crowd control flourishes, but I would have liked to see them a bit more as, you know, some sort of momentum combo, if you will, where rather than, you know, stoic, it's more along the lines of flowing and moving around and keeping multiple targets at bay. I don't have the experience to come up with any sort of Japanese-style flow pattern like that, but I would love to see some people that have practice in that tackle it. That'd be really cool to see. And then, like I said, I'm totally cool with the idea of him finishing in these low positions. And I'd really like to see some perfect counters from here, maybe ones that ended in, you know, takedowns or things like that. That would have been really sweet to see. And just more, I don't know, more powerful stuff. And then thematically, I don't really have anything that links it to moon per se, apart from, you know, Vagard is high, but you could also call that sun. I don't know if necessarily the moon may be more important. There might be some cultural stuff that I'm not aware of. But again, as far as the stances go, I find moon was a missed opportunity. Still liked it, but missed opportunity. But altogether though, that's gonna finish our breakdown. So I really appreciate those of you that have watched all of these. This was a really big and different project for me to tackle, as it's, you know, entirely removed from what I do, but it was a lot of fun. And thank you for sticking with me and bearing with my terrible spins and kicks. Now, as for what the next episode we're going to go over, I think I'm going to go back to my roots and start tackling For Honor's roster again, because I've done a lot of big projects recently, and I want to do just, you know, character of the week or 2 characters of the week again, as I think that would be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that, as well as some other new series on the channel. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and we will go over some other techniques another time.